Greetings, this is Greg. Before we get into the meat of this video, let's knock down this Spitfire. The Dora's MG-151 cannons make a real mess of things, especially when shooting at close range at a target with a non-self-sealing fuel tank. I want to talk about how best to use the Focke-Wulf FW-190 Dora 9 in simulation, specifically in DCS, which is Digital Combat Simulator. In multiplayer simulation, the Dora is far less popular than the BF-109K4, and I understand why. On paper, at least, the K4 is faster, has a better rate of climb, is far more maneuverable, and packs a 30mm cannon. However, the Dora has its advantages and is an absolute force to be reckoned with, and if flown in such a way as to take advantage of the plane's strengths, you can run up very high kill ratios. In this video, I'll talk about how to use this plane. Furthermore, I'll demonstrate that these tactics I describe do work by getting 10 air-to-air kills in a row on a multiplayer server with no airframe losses, meaning I make it back to base with a flyable airplane every time. Now, I am not the ace of the base in DCS. There are people in multiplayer who beat me in a fair fight almost every time. However, if you fly the Dora in such a way as to take advantage of its strengths, it doesn't matter too much how skilled your opponents are. To start off with, when in the Dora, think of yourself as a hunter through and through. In the Dora, you're out looking for victims and not looking for a fair fight. In fact, while looking for victims, you're actively avoiding a fair fight. Of course, you could do that in any fighter, but the Dora is particularly suited to this. Full disclosure, this isn't really how I normally fly the plane in DCS, because when I'm flying online, I'm trying to have fun. And frankly, I think it's fun to dive a Dora into a group of enemies with reckless abandon, or to have a dogfight with a good P-51 or P-47 pilot. But for purposes of this video, I'm flying the plane in the fashion I think is most effective in multiplayer simulation for the purposes of generating a high kill ratio, and it's probably the more historically accurate way to fly the plane, except of course that I'm flying it lone wolf style. Before we get into the action, we should probably talk about the Dora's advantages over the Allied fighters in DCS, and to some extent over the 109K4. Let's start with speed. The Dora can outrun any Allied fighter in DCS below 6,000 meters, or about 19,500 feet. Contrary to popular belief, the Dora is not a high-altitude fighter. It's a low and medium-altitude fighter. Its high-altitude performance is good enough to attack bombers, but not to duel with P-47s or P-51s up above 6,000 meters. This is a graph of the Dora's speed from a wartime test of the plane. It's with MW50 and seems to be very representative of the way it's modeled in DCS. Its speed starts to decrease dramatically above 6,000 meters because its single-stage supercharger, which is non-intercooled, is just out of breath up there, and power really starts to drop off. You should understand that it's not just the speed that's dropping off, it's the horsepower, which means that climb rate and sustained turn performance really suffer up there. You really want to avoid dogfighting in this airplane above 6,000 meters. The fastest World War II Allied fighter in DCS is the P-51D, so let's add that in. These numbers are from a wartime chart for a 51D and seem to coincide with what I see in DCS. I'm going to talk more about the specifics of this data and the hotter versions of each plane that are not in DCS at the end of the video. I know that's a subject that comes up a lot in regards to the DCS P-51, but for now, I want to stick to the main subject. The Dora can outrun the P-51 in DCS at most altitudes below 6,000 meters. However, it's darn close. When down very low, the Dora is about 12 kilometers per hour faster, which isn't much. It's enough to stay away from the P-51, but not necessarily enough to escape if it's already behind you and in gun range. Note that the Dora's greatest speed advantage over the P-51 is in the 4,500 to 5,500 meter range. Against any other Allied fighter, the Dora's speed edge is greater below 6,000 meters, making escape and evasion easier than it is against the P-51. Although in some cases, a pursuing P-47 is a greater threat because with its 850 cals, very large ammo supply, and sometimes a gyro sight, a P-47 pilot can hose you down from long range as you're trying to accelerate away. The Dora's strongest performance characteristic is its climb performance. When below 6,000 meters, it has a high rate of climb, and more importantly, it can climb at very high indicated airspeeds. I'll talk about how to use this to your advantage later in the video. It's a huge factor that's in your favor as a Dora pilot. The Dora has an excellent roll rate, good acceleration and deceleration. However, it's at a disadvantage versus the Allied fighters in a close-in dogfight in almost all situations because of its very high stall speed and poor turn performance. If you try to dogfight a Spitfire Mark 9 in a traditional turn and burn type of engagement, you will lose. The Spitfire will easily win a turn fight. Its margin of superiority is so great here that no amount of tactical trickery like low yo-yos or high yo-yos will help. One circle, two circle, level turn, climbing turn, whatever. It does not matter. The Dora will lose to the Spitfire in a turn fight almost every time. There are a few exceptions. In fact, these turn fight exceptions cover all the Allied airplanes. It's often worth entering a turn fight if the enemy fighter is sufficiently damaged before you get in there. If you know that a P-51 is already hit and you can risk slowing down, meaning there are not other enemies in the area, then you can try and turn fight him, and if it doesn't go well, escape to safety using the 180-degree rule I'll talk about later. Second, if the enemy plane is on the tail of another FW-190, an Anton or a Dora, during a turn fight, it's pretty safe to join in. For example, a Spitfire on the tail of a 190 Anton isn't going to be turning much tighter than the Anton because he's trying to get shots off. In fact, he's likely to be flying nice and steady, making himself an easy target. It may be worth joining in on that turn fight if there are no other enemies around. Third, if you know that your plane is close in turn performance to the enemy, and that means you're fighting a P-47 or a Mosquito, and yes, the Mossy can turn, it's possible you can win a fair and square turn fight. Apples to apples, the Thunderbolt will outturn the Dora. However, most Thunderbolt pilots don't use the flaps in combat, so if you do and they don't, you may be able to win that, especially if you're light on fuel and they aren't. Against the Thunderbolt or Mossy, if there are no other enemies around, it's safe to start a turn fight because you will be able to escape easily enough if you need to with the 180-degree rule. I don't need to explain this now as I end up demonstrating it in combat against a Spitfire later in the video. Last, at very high speeds, the Dora can turn with any Allied fighter because they all become G-limited by the pilot. As a general rule, if you're above 465 kilometers per hour indicated, you can pull a 6G turn and match your turn performance with a Spitfire. However, it's a horrible idea to do this for two reasons. First, you will slow down and end up playing the Spitfire's game. Second, and possibly worse, you stand a good chance of jamming your guns if you fire them while at high G. So let's talk about that for a moment. The Dora's cannons will jam if fired above about 4 Gs, and the machine guns will jam if fired above 8 Gs. As we don't have a G meter in the plane, we have to know the speeds associated with those limits. For example, if you are below 375 kph, the Dora will stall before it gets to 4 Gs, so it's always safe to fire. The machine guns are safe about 100% of the time, up to about 535 kph. If you're going faster than that, of course it's still okay to fire the guns, just don't do it while you're pulling back on the stick too hard because you could exceed those G limits for the guns and jam them. The Dora's guns, especially in combination with the Dora's gyro sight, are excellent. They pack a powerful punch, and the plane carries plenty of ammo, 250 rounds per cannon, and about twice that for the 13mm machine guns. You will see me adjusting the gyro sight quite a lot in this video. I use it as much as possible, and I switch it between gyro and fixed modes depending on the situation. I want to get this show on the road, and I'll cover the other combat tactics as we go. The plan is to get 10 air-to-air kills without losing a plane and end up in Paris for a night on the town. I'll start off in Carpaquet. Ironically, that's where I ended my last Dora video. And at first, I'll patrol the Normandy Peninsula. I'll have to land and rearm and refuel at least a couple times while fighting my way from Normandy to Paris. So we're westbound now, just south of the Normandy coast. One of the invasion beaches is off to the right there. And off in front of us, there are 2 aircraft engaged in a fight. And I know that there's no other enemy aircraft in the area, so I can safely go over there and see if I want to join into this fight and try and help out, which I do. However, I can't just get into the turn fight because it's a P-51 fighting a 109. So if I get into that with the Dora's inferior turn performance, I'll become the easier target and likely get shot down, or at least shot up. So what I'm going to do instead is cut across the circle and take some shots at the P-51. If they hit, great. If not, I'll be able to use my energy to stay safe. And even if the Mustang notices me and wants to go after me, he's not going to be able to do much in this situation. So I didn't lead it enough. I didn't get the nose up enough. Didn't come anywhere close to hitting. I'm going to full power. I have the MW50 switch in the armed position, so anytime I move the throttle all the way forward, the MW50 kicks on. You'll hear that come on. The engine makes a distinctly different sound when the MW50 is spraying versus when it's not. And I'll pull the power off a little bit to disengage it. I don't want to waste the water methanol. And I'll come in on the downhill. Occasionally you'll see me trigger the padlock, which will put red brackets around the airplane I'm looking at. It's different from IL-2. Padlock is not a search function. It doesn't work that way in DCS. It only enables you to lock onto something you're already really looking at. So coming back up in the climb, and the 109 got some really strong hits on the P-51 there, so now I'm comfortable slowing down and coming down into the circle because I know that I have a pretty good chance of being able to turn with the 51. Notice we got a slight accelerated stall there because I was really pushing the limits of what the Dora can do. And right now I see something bad happening. The 109 is going into a low yo-yo, which is a really bad idea in this specific situation. That will result in the 109 shooting out in front of the P-51, and I know that's what's going to happen. So now I'm really trying to get the P-51 into my sights before he gets the 109 into his. I've got the gyro gun sight all set up, and I've got to zoom the range in on it just slightly, which you'll probably, yeah, I just saw myself do it there. Fortunately, like I said, that P-51 is already damaged, so I can turn with them. I'll get some shots here. I got some hits. They weren't much, but they were enough to cause the 51 to start to break off. He probably thinks I'm another 109 and he can outrun me. I got some more hits there, and now the pilot's pulling up to bail out. So that's the first kill of P-51, and that was kind of interesting because it was one of those situations, actually 2 of those situations, where you can put the Dora into a turn fight. The first condition being that it was against a damaged airplane, and the second being that the Dora was already in a turn fight against against a friendly German airplane. Now, checking behind me, check 6. Always check all around after every fight because fights tend to bring undesirables your direction. I'm heading north out to sea because I want to swing around to the northwest side of the Normandy Peninsula and avoid anti-aircraft fire doing so. So now we've fast forwarded to the next engagement, and I see a P-47 off in the distance, way off there. We'll zoom in, and because it's P-47, I've got to readjust my gyro sight. It was set for a Spitfire or Mustang because those are the more likely things to encounter. Now it's set for a P-47. I'm concerned the 47 might turn in and go for a head-on pass, but he doesn't, thankfully. The 47, if it's a competent pilot with a gyro sight, can be very, very dangerous in a head-on pass. The Dora's pretty dangerous too, so if you're both in a head-on pass, there's some chance you're going to just shoot each other down. But I don't turn to fight the Thunderbolt because I've got some other things I'm worried about here. I'm concerned about my situational awareness. I know that there are other planes nearby, but I don't know where they are. And again, I know this because on the Wolfpack server, you can check with the German radar controller when radar is functioning, which is not every single time, but right now it is. And I know that there are other I know there are other enemy airplanes around. I also know that there's quite a bit of anti-aircraft fire around. There are 2 Allied bases that can send anti-aircraft fire my way, and also there are Allied ships. So what I'm going to do is just keep my speed up and head towards the coast. See that river mouth off to the left? Okay, I'm checking behind me. Off to the left, there's a mouth of 2 rivers there. People call that frog legs, and because it kind of looks like a frog's legs when you're up at altitude. That tends to be where there are a lot of battles. There's anti-aircraft fire to about my 1 o'clock position right now. There's anti-aircraft fire potentially to my 9 o'clock position from ships, and also to about my 10 to 11 o'clock from another base. So this forces me towards that river mouth. I really can't go anywhere else. And that happens a lot. That's why there's so many battles in that area on this server. Alright, what I'm doing right now is climbing at high speed. I'm climbing at 500 kilometers per hour. That gives me a pretty decent rate of climb and a lot of speed traveling forward. The Thunderbolt cannot possibly keep up. No Allied airplane can. Now, there's another Mustang involved in a turn fight up here, and as much as I would like to get in and try and help out, if I do that, I'll make myself an easy target for the pursuing Thunderbolt. So I'll take some pot shots to kind of do my part for king and country, so to speak. But then I'll just keep going straight. I don't want to get into this fight. I do want to keep track of it, because if I fight the Thunderbolt and that P-51 is victorious, I got to worry about the P-51 coming after me. So this is a situation where it's important to try and keep your situational awareness up to the extent possible. Now, you have to get about 3 kilometers ahead of a pursuing airplane before you can turn around and engage. That means that it should really be just a little bit more than a dot back there. It should be maybe possible to discern the wings on the airplane if you're zoomed in, but not much more than that. So I've just about got that distance right now on the Thunderbolt. I'm still trying to keep tabs on that fight. It's very difficult because of the distances involved, but I see some smoke, so something is happening over there. And also, I know now if I turn around, I've got a pretty good altitude advantage on that Thunderbolt. Notice my airspeed, 300 kilometers per hour. That's a very important speed in the Dora. That's the speed at which you get your best rate of climb. In other words, the greatest numbers of meters per second or feet per minute. And it's the speed that gives you your best sustained turn rate. Not instantaneous turn rate, but sustained. So we're turned around and we're taking fire from the P-51. He hit us very lightly, nothing to worry about. But we hit him too, also I think very lightly. I think just some machine gun rounds. So I'm going to come back around on the 47, and I'm pretty comfortable with what I'm seeing here. I'm winning this turn fight. I end up very quickly behind his 3-9 line here. I think he lost sight of me and just didn't turn aggressively enough. So now we're behind his 3-9 and with about equal energy. So I'm really comfy here. Now I'm really on the edge of what the Dora can do, but the Thunderbolt doesn't seem to be taking advantage of his potential turn performance. The Thunderbolt, to win a turn fight with the Dora, is much better off getting the fight down to lower speeds, but he's not doing that. So I know it's either a computer pilot set at one of the lower skill levels, not at ace, or it could be a less experienced human pilot. The only way in DCS to know for sure if you're on a multiplayer server, if it's AI or not, is after the battle, go into TAC view and check. I didn't do that in this particular fight, but I'm very certain now that this is a computer pilot, because most humans won't do this continual descending turn. It's just a losing battle, because you don't get slow when you're in a descending turn, and the P-47 needs to get the Dora to get slow. Alright, you'll notice some really sloppy work with the gyro gun sight here. I have it set properly, but I'm missing a lot. And the reason for that is, it's not the fault of the gyro gun sight, it's me. I put the plane in the sight and I pull the trigger. You can't do that. You have to keep the plane in for a second or two for the gyro to stabilize. And when you do that, you'll get hits. I did get some minor hits there, not as good as they should have been, but the earlier ones were extremely poor. Again, this Thunderbolt I'm pretty sure is an AI, which is fortunate. If it was a human pilot, this would be a different battle right now. So, closing in, we're at high G. That shows you how fast we're going. Again, this Thunderbolt is just using the wrong tactic, in my view, against a single 1v1 fight with the Dora. There are some situations where you do want to do this. So now I'm settling down. I'm going to hold the Dora in the sights long enough. I didn't do it there, but I will. And now I'm starting to get some hits. And here, now I'm tracking the Dora. The gun sight is stabilized. Now when I pull the trigger, I get really good hits, and that's the end. So that was a really good example of how not to use the gyro sight, and then ultimately how to use the gyro sight. As long as it's all set up and you hold your target in the ring for a couple of seconds, it's going to work well. Now we need to check 6. We're very near not one but 2 enemy bases. A plane has crashed. It's very likely that there are some undesirables on their way over here. We can't go this direction. Allied ships over there. Anti-aircraft fire. We can't go that direction where I'm looking right now. Allied base over there. We can't go back. Allied base over there. So our only real choice is to head towards that river mouth, as I discussed earlier. And again, on the Wolfpack server on the Normandy map, there is a lot of action near that river mouth. In fact, so much so that I would say that if you log onto the map and fly there, you're going to be in a fight. Alright, so we've left that area and we're continuing more or less southwest bound away from that river mouth, and radar has reported somebody up in front of me. Now we've shot down 2 airplanes so far, a P-51 and an AI P-47. I don't know what's up ahead of me. I'm a little low on fuel. I'm very low on ammo, at least cannon ammunition. Maybe not very low, but I'm about, 50% empty. And I don't know what's in front of me. So I'd like to go return to base, rearm and refuel, but I'm not going to, because I don't want to leave whoever this is up in front of me at my 6 o'clock as I run for home. So I'm going to stay low. It's very hard to see aircraft that are below you in DCS. It's easier, at least for me, to see them when they're above me. So I see it's a mosquito, so I'm going to set my gyro gun sight to a mosquito's wingspan, and I'm going to try and get a kill from the low 12 o'clock position. And that's a pathetic miss. I kill planes from that exact angle all the time. And in this entire video, I don't think I successfully do that a single time. You may have saw me hit him with the padlock real quick there. That'll help you keep him in sight. So, fortunately, because I wasn't firing tracers, the mosquito wasn't alerted to my presence. I think he knows I'm nearby, but I think when he last checked, he thought that I was at his 12 o'clock position, and he doesn't realize that we've already overflown each other. He definitely knows that there are enemies about. So we need to close in pretty quickly before he figures this out, but we are really moving fast. The Dora can run down the mosquito without too much trouble, although the mosquito is fast, but the Dora is faster. So I've got my gyro sight all set up, and I want to stay at the low 6 position. That's generally where you want to kill things with the Dora. The Dora is particularly good at this because it can climb while gaining on enemy aircraft. A lot of other fighters can't do that, so you can low 6 people like there's no tomorrow in this airplane. So alright, we'll light him up here, and the mosquito's on fire, so he's done for. He's bailing out. And we are now in the clear, and we're going to head to linger rolls to land and rearm and refuel this thing. So that's 3 kills, 2 of them on really unsuspecting opponents. So we're headed toward linger rolls at high speed. We're down low. I'm checking radar because I think somebody's following me. Not sure if it's friend or foe. Okay, there is an enemy west of us, so that's behind us, eastbound, meaning he's chasing us. He's low, and it's a P-51. So he's not going to be able to catch us because unless he just came out of a dive, his energy state's going to be about the same as ours, and we can outrun him down here. And now he's got to choose. Is he going to overfly linger rolls and risk the anti-aircraft fire? Or is he going to go around it and lose sight of me? So I'm checking the heading to Carpiquay. We're no longer landing at linger rolls. I don't have the fuel or ammo to fight this P-51. We're just going to keep going straight to Carpiquay, which is only like 6 minutes or something away anyhow. Next time we look over our shoulder, we'll see that the P-51 elected to brave the anti-aircraft fire from linger rolls and ended up taking hits and crashing on the field. Boom, just crashed and blew up. So one less P-51. I don't get credit for that, but I still feel good about it because it contributed to the cause. So I also am pretty darn sure that there's a Spitfire in pursuit of us, but I can't see him. So I'm going to keep my speed up to linger rolls, land, get off the runway, and then now we've despawned and got a new airplane because I didn't want to repair it, because we did take some hits earlier from that P-47, if you recall. Setting it up with no tracers, my standard paint scheme and number. We're going to set the gyro gun sight altitude adjustment to 0 to 2,000 meters. Turn off the nav lights and just doing my normal flow. Gyro gun sights on, wingspan adjusters to Spitfire. Weapons are armed, water methanol switch is armed, and I flip the cover to allow me to retract the landing gear after I take off. Checking radar, there's somebody near, and again, I'm pretty darn sure it's a Spitfire because one of those was after me. It just couldn't catch up before I safely got to the airport and landed. Once the armorers and fuelers are done working their magic, we're going to blast off, and this is an emergency takeoff, so we're not going to taxi to a runway. The greatest threat right now is from the enemy, not from friendly taxiing aircraft. So we're blasting off along the grass. You may notice that I have the control stick in the neutral position, left and right. That was a big mistake. You always want to hold that stick all the way back and to the right in the initial portion of the takeoff roll in a Dora, or a Anton for that matter. So gears coming up, flaps are coming up. I want to get to 300 kilometers per hour. That's the minimum speed at which the Dora becomes combat effective, let's say. Very rare that you would be going slower than that in combat. It does happen, but it's rare. So I see another airplane in the distance, but as I get closer, I see that that is an FW-190, probably an Anton, coming in to land. So we've got to figure out where this enemy aircraft is. So I'll start my turn and just start looking for him. Hopefully anti-aircraft fire will provide a clue. I want to say I cut out a fair amount of this video. This entire video was like over 4 hours long because it takes a long time to get 4 kills on a, 10 kills on a multiplayer server. As you can see, I've already had to land and rearm one time. So disregard the black screen here. That's because I'm checking to make sure my recording software is recording. I actually missed some kills because of that. We'll talk about that later. Alright, I see the anti-aircraft fire pointing out the Spitfire, and looks like he's chasing a 190, which is great, except that I don't have the energy to get into this fight. I'm relatively low and slow as compared to those two airplanes. So I'm going to just go out straight for a while, build up some speed and energy, and then come back in. So now we're coming back in, and we're going to be able to turn in with this Spitfire. You can see we're right on the edge, but I'm going to be able to do it largely because he's chasing an opponent that's not turning that tightly. So we'll get in here. I've got the gyro sight all set up, and I should have killed him in one shot here. This wasn't a very good job. I think I did get some hits there, but it wasn't enough. In fact, it looks like he didn't even notice it. Maybe I didn't hit him at all. So we'll get it lined up again, and now we got some hits. He notices that. He breaks off his attack, so I just helped out my buddy. We're right over Carpiquay. You can see some anti-aircraft fire coming this way. But that Spitfire is badly damaged now, and you can dogfight on even terms with a heavily damaged Spitfire if you're in a good Dora. Right now I'm wishing I took less fuel, but I didn't. So he's jinking. I've now turned off my gyro sight because of that, and we're going to light him up. So the Spitfire is going down, but unfortunately we took friendly fire there. You know, I'm flying in this paint scheme because it's the paint scheme that during the war was the least likely, in my view anyway, to take friendly fire. That was the intent of that red and white striped underbelly that you sometimes see on Doras. Of course, with AI ground gunners, that's not going to do you any good. But it's very rare to get hit by friendly anti-aircraft fire in DCS, but it just happened, and I know it happened because in this one I went into TAC view to look and see what happened. I thought maybe there was another airplane around or another enemy aircraft I didn't know about, or maybe a friendly aircraft that I didn't see, but no, that wasn't it. That was friendly anti-aircraft fire. So now, even though we're fat on fuel and ammo, we've got to land this thing back here at Carpiquet and get a new airplane. But hey, we've got 4 air-to-air kills so far, and we did take damage from a P-47 early on, but other than that, I think this is one of only 2 times I take any damage in this entire ordeal. It's really possible to stay safe in the Dora and not take damage very often. And when it does get damaged, it typically gets you home, which is why, if you want to generate a really high kill ratio, it's really a good plane to use. Now I'm coming in really fast here, 300 kilometers per hour, so I'm going to use a slip to bleed off the speed. And I just want to get the thing on the ground in one piece. If I wreck the airplane, that counts as a loss, and I would have to call it 4 kills in a row instead of the 10, which of course is what I really want. Also, notice, yeah, the speed's about right now, about 200 for the touchdown. I mean, basically the plane is flying okay. So we're on the ground, and I want to get it solidly on the ground, get the stick all the way back to lock the tail wheel, and then use the rudders and brakes to steer as best I can. So now we'll steer off the runway to make us less visible to any enemy aircraft that come into the area. If you're sitting on the runway, you're really an easy target. And we're going to have to shut this thing down and get out of it and get a new airplane. Looking at it externally, it's pretty shot up, but I've seen worse. Well, I had that airplane repaired, rearmed, and refueled, and we're heading westbound along the Normandy coast. I see an aircraft up ahead, which I'm pretty darn sure is an enemy. I don't know what type, but I have my gun sight set for Spitfire or P-51. Again, we're heading towards what people refer to as frog legs. There's usually some action over there. And I want to go for a low 12 o'clock shot, and I miss it. But this really is normally a bread and butter shot for me. It works pretty well in the Dora, but I certainly don't succeed with it here. But that's okay. I miss and bring the plane on around. I want to stay below him so I'm a little harder to see, and then come in from the low 6 position. The low 6 attack works very well. You're hard to see there, and the Dora can pull this off really well because it can climb at a higher airspeed than any Allied fighter cruises, at least cruises normally. So that makes it pretty easy to close in on people from here, and they don't have a whole lot of time to notice you. If we were closing in on somebody's low 6 in a slower airplane, then they've got more time to notice that you're there. So this is going pretty well. He definitely can't see me. Now, he may be asking Allied radar if there are enemy airplanes in the area. In fact, I think that's what happens here, because he seems to get some warning, but he doesn't really go into a hard brake turn, so I know he didn't see me. So he's turning now, probably because he knows somebody's around and he's looking for me, but I got my gyro sight set up just right, and you can see with the gyro sight and you use it correctly, it makes quick work of things. So that Thunderbolt's on fire. That might have actually been a turbocharger fire. In any case, that Thunderbolt pilot's not putting out that fire. Now, I will say the P-47 can fly around for a surprising amount of time while it's on fire, so you do have to watch for that. Now, here's another aircraft, but that's a Dora, so that's a friendly. Anyway, back to talking about the P-47. A really aggressive pilot might stay in the fight while the plane is on fire, especially if it's a turbocharger fire, because that doesn't get into the cockpit too quickly. So just because a Thunderbolt's on fire doesn't mean it's no longer dangerous, but it does mean it's going to go down, so you can just escape. Now, around this point, an interesting thing happened. I got a message from the controllers saying that Ju-88s were going to come into the area and bomb an Allied target. Knowing that Ju-88s are juicy targets, I headed in that direction, and unfortunately I forgot to start the recording for this whole part of the video, so I'll just tell you what happened. And you didn't miss too much. I went in and found a Thunderbolt that was tearing up the Ju-88s, and I low-sixed the Thunderbolt and shot him down, just as I just did a moment ago, except that the whole situation was at much lower altitude. And that was a human opponent. In fact, I talked with him. That guy is a really good Thunderbolt pilot. That was Bishop. He's got his own channel. And you'll see that discussion we had a little bit later, so hopefully that makes sense of that. It also explains why I'll suddenly have one more kill than we actually saw. Additionally, after low-sixing that Thunderbolt and shooting it down, I got the bright idea of strafing some Allied forces. And when I did that, I took out a ground target, but then I took some rounds and limped my way to Deauville, where I landed, and that's where we're going to pick things up, and we're going to start working our way to Paris. So all of our fighting so far has been on this part of the Normandy Peninsula, but now we're going to the extreme east edge of the Normandy Peninsula, near the mouth of the Seine River. I know the name of that one because it's the one that goes through Paris, and we're going to take off from there. The surface at Deauville is very rough. It's a little bit tricky to take off or land here, and that rough surface is aggravated by the fact that there are bomb craters all over the place. It's also hard to even figure out where the runway is and line up correctly on it. This isn't a very good airport unless you're really good at takeoffs or landings. By the way, I did not land here. I thought about that. After I strafed St. Lo, the Allied forces there, I took some minor damage, but better safe than sorry, so I landed at the nearest German base, which was Lingerolz, and then either through the magic of DCS or, if you want to use your imagination, maybe my character took a bus or a truck, but in any case, we ended up here at Deauville. So we're taking off. I don't have the stick to the right. I can't believe I'm screwing this up. That's something I talk about quite a bit, proper takeoff techniques in the 190s. In any case, I messed that up, but we survived it, although that was close. And gears coming up, flaps are coming up. I'm pulling the power back to 2700 RPM because that saves a lot of fuel versus 3000 RPM. Now, if there are enemies about, I definitely want to leave it at 3000. You can run it at 3000 RPM all day long, provided you make sure to keep the oil temperature in check by manually manipulating the cowl flaps. Notice in the message list on the left, Bishop mentions the low-sixing technique and that it's hard to counter that. And he's exactly right. That's how I got him. I would not have wanted to fight him in a fair fight. I'll put a link to Bishop's channel in the description. He has quite a few DCS videos. Notice that my Dora has been demoted to cabbage crate. That's an interesting term he used there. Cabbage crate, for those of you who don't know, is a very poorly made wooden crate, usually used to hold lower value produce like cabbage. I know this because I've been with my wife to the farmer's market. In any case, there's the Seine River up ahead, and the mouth of the Seine is to the left. There's a lot of trade and commerce on the Seine. The Seine also runs through Paris. It's sort of a French Mississippi River. Of course, it's much smaller. So we're going to head off up the Seine towards Paris into harm's way and hopefully get a few more battles before we get there. As we head towards Paris, I repeatedly query the German radar controller for the location of enemy aircraft, so I know that there's somebody up ahead. The problem is the enemy probably knows that I'm here because they can do the same thing. Plus, I accidentally flew too close to an Allied base, and anti-aircraft fire came my way, which certainly would have alerted anyone in the area to my presence. So I see the enemy aircraft, and zooming in, it's a P-47, so I've got to readjust my gun sight for that. Fortunately, I already have the altitude window set correctly. Now, once again, low 12 o'clock, it's my bread and butter thing, and I miss it. How embarrassing. In any case, fortunately, I'm not using tracers, so the enemy did not see me. I can come back around, close in on him, and hopefully get some shots in before he figures out I'm here. But this is a bit of a race because eventually he's going to check his radar controller, and see that there's somebody behind him and nearby. I zoomed out for the fisheye lens effect there to try and keep the enemy in sight. That really helps, and some people consider zooming in and zooming out in DCS not realistic or cheating. I don't think so. You have to zoom out because that makes up to an extent for the fact that you don't have the normal peripheral vision you would have if you were actually sitting in the airplane. And as for zooming in, that gives you the detail and enables you to ascertain certain things that you would be able to do in real life by just staring at it for a moment. But you can't really do that in the monitor. The monitor doesn't differentiate between something you're staring at or something that's off to the side a little bit. Notice that we're at full power, 3250 RPM, and we're spraying water methanol. Well, we were. I just pulled back the power to shut it off. But you can tell when we're spraying water methanol, not only by the sound, but because on the gauge, which is just to the right of the oil temp gauge, the needle will move over to the right to about the 2 o'clock position when you're spraying. So I've pulled back the power because I don't want to waste the water methanol, and we're closing in fast enough. Again, the beauty of the Dora is that you can close in on a cruising fighter while climbing, and that makes this hunting method using the low 6 position pretty easy to use. Unfortunately, the P-47 noticed that I'm there, and he is starting to evade. I'm not sure that he saw me, but he certainly checked the radar controller. He's not maneuvering too hard, so I don't think he saw me. I'll try and make good use of the gyro sight here. It's all set correctly, although the fact that he's descending sort of screws up my altitude setting, but if you're only one range off, it's probably going to be okay. So I used the gyro sight, and I got some hits there. Got some hits there. You'll notice a hit about every time I pull the trigger if you use the sight correctly. You may have also noticed that I'm adjusting the range on the sight as I come in to keep the P-47 wingspan equal to the diameter of the circle. So I want the crosshairs on the 47 wingtips in the circle and track it for a second or two before I pull the trigger. And the gyro sight makes quick work of things. I used relatively minimal ammunition there shooting down the P-47. Now, of course, he's on fire, trailing a lot of smoke, so I really want to leave this area because I don't want enemy aircraft to be coming in and finding me. I want to be hunting them. So we'll reestablish our course towards Paris and hopefully find some more targets. We're moving in fast on an unsuspecting Spitfire. You might notice I try to adjust the range on the gyro gun sight, but I just don't have time. Doesn't matter, I'm firing from close range anyway, where the gyro doesn't do much good, and we made very quick work of that Spitfire. Now, most Spitfire variants, including the ones used in the Battle of Britain, as well as the Mark V and the Mark IX and the Mark 14s and 16s, have 2 fuel tanks forward of the cockpit. The lower fuel tank is self-sealing, but the upper one is not. Now, that upper non-self-sealing fuel tank does have some light armor protection, but it's nothing that will stand up to the firepower of the Dora. In fact, upper fuel tanks caught on fire so often in Spitfires that for a while Britain led the world in plastic surgery and facial reconstruction. In fact, there's a monument in Britain to the doctor that pioneered the charge on that, so to speak. And I can't think of the name of the doctor or where that monument is, but if you're interested, you can look it up. I imagine about this time some of you are thinking, well, Greg, you're not really demonstrating any amazing skill or really clever tactics with the Dora. And that's true, but that's kind of the point of the video. When you're flying a Dora, you don't need those things. You can rely on the plane's speed, tremendous climb performance, firepower, and the accuracy of the gyro gun sight, provided you understand how to set it up and you keep it set properly for the engagement that you're in. And those same attributes that make the Dora so good offensively also make the Dora good defensively. It's very hard for people to come up on you from your 6 o'clock position, let alone your low 6, because the plane is so fast. Now, it is possible for somebody to low 6 you in a Dora, obviously if you're going slow or they've built up speed in a dive. I mean, there are some cases where it can happen, but it's very rare, very difficult for the enemy to do. Now, that's Paris off to the left, you can see the Eiffel Tower there. I did check a few minutes ago when we were off camera the radar controller. In other words, I pressed the right button to inquire about the position of friendly and enemy aircraft. There are no friendly aircraft anywhere near me, but there are enemy aircraft, and so I know that the dot that I can see way out in front of me has to be an enemy. He's significantly above me, probably a Mustang or Spitfire. Human pilots on this server tend to mostly fly, on the Allied side, Mustangs and Spitfires. There'll be some Thunderbolts, Mosquitoes, and I-16s mixed in. The AI pilots tend to fly Thunderbolts, Spitfires, and Mustangs. I don't think they ever fly I-16s or Mosquitoes, but I'm not sure about that. And in any case, that could, I suppose, change at any time. They make changes to the server on a somewhat regular basis. So I'm not going to be able to get this guy from the low 12 o'clock position. I'm going to try and get him from the low 6 o'clock position by doing an Immelmann and hopefully ending up behind him. If you go vertical like this into an Immelmann in the Dora, you need 400 kilometers per hour indicated at the time you enter the maneuver. More is better, and it varies a little bit with weight and altitude. But as a general rule, if you don't have 400 kilometers per hour, you're not going to be able to pull up into the vertical. You need to keep that in mind when you're in fights with somebody, because if you're down at 300 and they go vertical, you need to know that you can't follow. Alright, we lost a lot of speed in that maneuver, but we're chasing a Spitfire and we can gain pretty quickly. Now, he certainly knows we're somewhere about. In fact, he was flying this direction right for us, almost certainly because his radar controller told him about us. However, he probably doesn't know that we're behind him just yet. So, once again, this is kind of a race to get the shot in before he queries his controller and finds out that there's an enemy behind him. So you guys have seen this story before. We've got our gyro gun sight set properly. We're trying to close in on his low 6 and get the shot. And if we get a shot in on a Spitfire at close range, he's done for. Whether it knocks him out of the fight immediately or whether we get him later, it doesn't really matter. Unfortunately for us, though, he found out we were there. I think certainly from the radar controller, I think I was doing a good job of staying in his blind spot. Nevertheless, he's turning at a rate we can't match. And furthermore, he's not turning as tight as he could. He's keeping his speed up, which means that this is probably a pretty dangerous character. He's staying out of our gun sight, but not bleeding off much speed doing it. You know you're dealing with a weaker pilot when they crank that Spitfire into a really hard turn and bleed off all their energy. So I don't have any good way to come in and attack him right now. My best move is to keep my speed up, keep a shallow climb going, and keep him in sight. If he just keeps the turn up, he'll end up on my 6 o'clock position, but out of range, so he won't be able to shoot me, and I'll have an altitude advantage, and I'll start working the distance and altitude game. You can see I shot a padlock out there just for a second, just to help keep tabs on him. Now it appears that he's stopped his turn, and I think he's either lost sight of me, or it's possible that he thinks that his information from the radar controller was incorrect. I don't really know what, but I can tell you that this does happen. People lose sight of you in DCS and then get overconfident and think that, well, if they've lost sight of you, you've lost sight of them. But, of course, that's not always the case, and it's not the case right now. I can still see this Spitfire, and I plan on closing in for a second attempt at a sneak attack. Of course, the dilemma here is that this Spitfire pilot seems to be, from what we can tell so far, a pretty sharp character. So I don't think we're going to successfully sneak up on him. We didn't sneak up on him the first time. It's reasonable to think he's very suspicious right now. I do have my gyro gun sight set. You have to adjust that for altitude in the Dora every 2,000 meters up or down, and sometimes that's really inconvenient. You can't always go heads down to do that. So there are going to be cases where you're best off turning off the gyro and using the gun sight as a standard reflector sight. But generally speaking, the gyro gun sight gives you an advantage, and you want to use it when you can. I'm descending to build up speed to close the distance more rapidly and to stay safely in his low 6 and hopefully blend into the terrain. But it seems like this isn't working. He's starting to climb, which is also making him very difficult to see that I hit him with a padlock there just to make sure I know where he is. and we're going to climb, and unfortunately he's evading us. There is no way we can turn with him. We cannot possibly get a shot in if I continue this left turn, but I have to continue the left turn. If I straighten out or go to the right, he's going to turn right and he'll get on my 6 within gun range. The name of the game here is to stay in the left turn until he's at the 180 degree point. This is that 180 rule I talked about. Once he's there, provided I'm at 300 kilometers per hour or thereabouts, I will be able to accelerate away in level flight or a slight climb, and he's going to get on my 6 o'clock, but he'll be out of gun range. The thing to keep in mind here is that in that situation where we're in a turn fight with the Spitfire, he's going to get on our 6 o'clock anyway. There's really nothing you can do to prevent that. So by using the 180 degree rule, starting the turn when he's directly across the circle opposite of us, his heading is 180 degrees off of ours, I can ensure that when he does get on our 6 o'clock, he's out of gun range and can't do anything. Then I'll just continue to fly straight. I'm going to check the map and kind of figure out where we are here. But I could continue to fly straight and just ignore him because he can't catch up, and I could just go after easier prey. Or, when I feel the time is right, I can turn around and come back in on him. Now, in this case, I'm turning around way too soon. I got impatient here. This is a big mistake. Don't get impatient when you're flying the Dora. The Dora is all about being patient and keeping your head in the game. There was no way I was going to get that shot. Fortunately, he didn't want to risk a head-on pass, which was probably smart of him, so he didn't get a shot either. He went maneuvered to try and get onto my 6 again, which he's done, but again, he's out of gun range. So I'm not going to make that same mistake again. I'm going to fly at high speed in a shallow climb, and I'm going to try and open up some distance. I need about 3 kilometers of distance before I can turn around and have enough room to have a reasonable chance of getting a shot off on him. I'm thinking about quite a few things here. I'm thinking about friendly aircraft, enemy aircraft. There are no other enemies in the immediate area, and there are no friendlies anywhere near. I would have liked to fly towards a friendly aircraft in this situation to try and get some support, because this Spitfire pilot is a pretty cool customer, and I really don't want to fight him 1v1. But then again, I don't want to just run away either. I do want to finish this fight. So we're going to open up the distance and turn back around. Now before I do that, I want to look for airports in case I get hit in the head-on pass. It's not too likely, but it's possible. Oh, my dog's upset about something. I don't know if you can hear that in the background. In any case, I want to get all set up for the head-on pass. I'm going to double check my gyro sight, and just as importantly, I'm going to start thinking about where I'm going to go if this whole thing goes pear-shaped on me. I know I'm very near Evero, which is a friendly airport, and Evero is very near Conscious, which is a German-held airport. I would like to go to Conscious in order to rearm, refuel, and repair if necessary. I'd like to get to Paris in this same exact airplane, although it's not really all that important that I do so. What's important right now, again, is just getting the distance. Notice I'm being very patient. Okay, there's Evero, so I could land there if I have to, so that'll be a good spot to turn around. Now let's use the map and use the ruler tool to get the heading from Evero to Conscious. That'll enable me to run for a friendly base if I'm damaged, and also run towards friendly anti-aircraft fire if I feel I need the support. So this is a good spot to turn around. I don't have any friendlies to support me other than possibly an aircraft fire. I've got a safe landing airport right below me, a friendly airport nearby, and plenty of distance so I can turn around and get my sights on target. So that's what I'm going to do. And with the gyro sight and time to line up, if he doesn't swerve, he's going to get hit. Alright, we got good hits. It's very hard for a Spitfire to hit you in a head-on approach from a distance. Up close he could do it, but I hit him early enough that he was never really much of a threat there. That big puff of white smoke is because the Spitfire uses a highly pressurized cooling system, and when it gets hit, especially in the relatively low air pressure up at altitude, the Spitfire expels a large amount of its coolant almost right away. So his engine will now be suffering from very decreased performance, plus his wings are hit. We know that because that's where the radiators and intercoolers and so forth are located. Its cooling stuff, for the most part, is in the wings. So I know he's not going to be able to maneuver well. He can't outrun me or get away even in a perfect Spitfire. So I'm comfortable slowing down and coming in for a nice, safe shot, because even if he starts trying to turn with me or outturn me, he's not going to be able to get onto my 6 o'clocks. I just don't have anything to worry about here. That's one of the nice things about coming in on a Spitfire. If this was a P-51 undamaged, yeah, I'd have some things to worry about. So one of his landing gear legs is down. We know his engine has problems. We know his wings have problems. He's basically just a sitting duck here. He probably has flight controls that are shot out too. So line him up, and boom, as soon as we got a hit on that fuselage forward of the cockpit, we lit up that non-self-sealing fuel tank. So there's Evero. We're going to head for Conscious and land. So we're on final going into Conscious. This is kind of interesting because my airspeed indicator is rapidly decreasing. That's not because I'm slowing down that fast. It's because the line between the airspeed indicator and the pitot tube is depressurizing. Either this is the delayed effect of damage I took and didn't know about, or it's something that's just programmed into the scenario on this server. I know that in single player action, the mission builders can program in all sorts of failures and base it on random chance or be triggered by certain events, time, proximity to other things on the server, and so forth. I don't know that that happens in multiplayer, but in any case, it's definitely failed. So maybe I took damage that I didn't know about. Maybe one of those 303 rounds from the Spitfire hit near my pitot tube. In any case, the plane has made it to a German base just fine, so we'll repair, rearm, refuel, and hopefully start our final leg of the journey to Paris and get another kill on the way there. I think I'm at 9 kills now. I've kind of lost track, but I'll think about it as we rearm and refuel here.
Bandit at 310, foot 100 to 2000.
We are on our way to Paris. There is a Spitfire in front of us. He just ducked into the clouds, and I hope to catch him on the other side when he comes out. He knows I'm here, but he may have lost sight of me. He almost certainly did, just like I lost sight of him because of the clouds, but I'm betting I'm going to reacquire him first. So I see him, and I'm fairly confident he doesn't see me. If he does, he's going to tighten this turn down, but he doesn't. He turns the other way, which means he's probably looking for me, and he's probably looking for me at his 7 to 8 o'clock back towards that cloud. So I'm going to be able to come in here, and I make a mistake here. I should have hit him from low 6. When you hit him from high 6, or even right at 6, there's a chance they're going to pick you up in the rear view mirror. The Spitfires usually have one. But in any case, he didn't see us, and we got hits into that forward fuel tank, which is typically what I try and do, and set him on fire. So that plane is done. There is at least one other airplane between us and Paris, according to enemy radar. So let's use the magic of DCS, fast forward a bit, and we're at the low 6 position of a Thunderbolt. So we want to get our gun sight set up, and this time I'm going to fire from a little bit longer range. I'm getting late in the mission here, and I really don't want a prolonged fight, especially since I don't know if that's a human or AI. It could be somebody really, really good. I'm just going to start shooting them from about 400 yards. That way, no matter who it is, once I've got rounds in that airplane, I'm going to be at a big enough advantage to almost certainly win the fight. So we'll open up here, and looks like we didn't do a whole lot, but we did. Pilot's bailing out. We probably knocked out the controls. I'm not sure. Not as exciting as seeing smoke and an explosion, but sometimes you get what you get. So there shouldn't be any more enemies between us and Paris. So let's head over there. Well, we made it to Paris. It's been a long, tough journey. This total flight represents about 4.5 hours on the server. It takes a long time to get all these kills, especially when you're flying the plane in a very conservative fashion like I was, and just not taking whatever battle comes your way, but taking whatever battle comes your way that you think you can win. It's a train station down there. All sorts of detail is built into the city of Paris on the Normandy 2 map in DCS. Keep in mind, I'm playing this on a fairly old computer. It only has 16 gigs of RAM. Most people are playing with 32 gigs of RAM or more. Also, I have an older graphics card. I mean, just the whole rig is older. So this doesn't showcase how well or how great DCS can look. Maybe it does showcase how well DCS can play and work on an older computer, but it doesn't show off what DCS can really look like. If you want to see that, there are plenty of channels that have exciting action with great graphics. There are a bunch of them that come to mind, really too many to list, but just ones that are popping into my head are Growling Sidewinders, which I think is probably the big one. Grim Reapers is really big. Cortana has some really good looking videos with some good FW190 action in it, but my video is just, you know, not about the eye candy. I'm just trying to have content here. I will get a better computer at some point. It's just not high on my list. I'm happy with the way it flies in combat, and I'm not really concerned about the eye candy for my own personal use. We flew over the Arc de Triomphe a moment ago. I thought about going knife edge and trying to fly through it, but I thought, nah, that'll be a horrible end to this video if I don't make it, and since I haven't tried that, I probably won't make it. We have one of those Arc de Triomphs just like that in Vegas. Actually, we have an Eiffel Tower in Vegas also, and ours has a really nice restaurant in it. I don't think it's as tall as the one in Paris, though. Right now, there's zero chance of taking any enemy fire because, as I said, there are no enemy aircraft in the area, and I believe that the date of this map is July of 1944, so Paris would still be under control of the Vichy regime, which was very cooperative with Germany's National Socialist Workers' Party. I'm on short final to the airport at Orly. That's just on the outskirts of Paris. We want to come in at 250 kilometers per hour on final, about a 3-degree glide slope with the flaps all the way down, gear down of course. And I want to slow to about 220 kilometers per hour on short final and cross the fence at 220. I would like to have a really good landing here, but that didn't really go my way. But like I say, after 4 hours or maybe 4.5 hours, some huge amount of time on the server, it gets pretty tiring. And I will say the Dora, that's another advantage of the Dora. Since it's a little bit easier to fly than some of the airplanes, you're maybe a little fresher after a long battle. Or it's easier to fight in, I should say, because of the way you use it when you fight. So we're touching down off the center line, kind of bouncing, or in the yaw all over the place. But we're going to get the thing on the ground and going to be just okay. So our attempt to get 10 kills without losing an airplane is intact. We did not lose an airplane. We did get shot a few times. We got shot once by that P-47 in a head-on, and we got possibly shot by a Spitfire in the head-on. I'm still not sure why that airspeed indicator depressurized. We got hit by friendly ground fire once, and although I failed to record it, I got hit by ground fire from the Allied forces at St. Lo. So we'll taxi in, we'll shut this thing down, and we'll take a look at the final score. Hopefully, this video has given you some pretty good idea of how to use the Dora in combat. As I said at the beginning of the video, it's all about using the plane as if you're a hunter. You're not as if you're a fighter. You're looking to sneak up on people and kill them, and if things don't go your way, you're looking to escape and find an easier victim. If you really want to, you can come back in and take shots at them, but often it's most productive with the Spitfire, for example. If it's behind you, just keep going. It's going to lose sight of you, and you'll find some nice juicy targets somewhere else down the line. When I started making this video, I had hopes of encountering certain types of airplanes. I would have liked to have had a dogfight with a Mosquito, with an I-16. I wanted to take on some B-17 bombers, but with the dynamic nature of a multiplayer server, you just have to kind of take what you can get, and that's what I did. These were the planes that I had battles with in the consecutive order from the time I took off initially in Carpequay until now when I got to Paris. So I did make a second video showing the bomber action. By the way, I did not shut that engine down properly for those of you that caught that. I couldn't remember the key command to pull the throttle into the idle cutoff position. Slipped my mind for a second, so I just shut it down with the fuel selector valve. And here's our external view. Isn't she beautiful? The Dora in DCS is really a great module. It's well worth getting, especially if you like the World War II stuff and you fly on the Normandy or the Channel maps. It is a little bit unpopular in DCS, and I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that when this thing came out, it did have a lot of bugs and a lot of problems, and it took the company that makes this module for DCS quite a while to get it all sorted out. But it's sorted out now. You have my word for it. It works perfectly, and nobody's paying me to say that. I bought this thing at full price with my own money, and I've been enjoying it for a time. And I bought it when it still had problems, and I know now that all of those problems are resolved. So here's the final score. I got 11 air-to-air kills and 1 ground kill, and I shouldn't have gone after a ground target because I risked the whole operation by doing that. And that's not really what the Dora is for. If you want to go after ground targets, take the Anton, or if you're on the Allied side, take a Thunderbolt or maybe a Mosquito. So that score's pretty good, although look at Bishop up at the top of the chart. He's got 17 air-to-air kills and 18 ground kills, so he's pretty awesome. He did lose 1 airplane, and I think we know how that happened, but Bishop is a real force to be reckoned with. He's got his own channel. I'll put a link to that in the description. This is probably the last video I'm going to make for quite a while flying the Dora in DCS. I want to get back to the Anton and the P-47, and also I want to start flying the Spitfire and Mosquito. Plus I do fly some of the jets in DCS, just not in multiplayer. I fly the F-14 and the MiG-19. Anyhow, I really appreciate everybody watching. I also appreciate all of the support on Patreon. You guys are great. My computer's beeping at me, so I guess that means it's time to go. So have a great day, and goodbye.